Thank you, Phyllis. I do appreciate that. We'll read the Statement of Anonymity. The 11th tradition states that we maintain anonymity at the level of press, radio, TV, and films. We ask that you respect our anonymity when taking pictures. Be careful of the people in the background. Now, for the exciting part of the evening. I'm going to introduce Joe to you. He's going to speak first. I talked to him once or twice on the phone and got to know him a little bit there, but last night having dinner and just talking to him today, he's really a marvelous person. I can't wait to hear his lead. I've already heard Jones on tape. Now, I can't wait to hear the other side, where it all came from. But with that, I'm going to give you Joe, okay?
Good evening. My name's Joe. I'm an alcoholic. It's nice to be here tonight and be sober. And standing up here behind this podium, if you can't see me, I'm sure you will hear me. I'd like to thank the committee for inviting us here. We've been to Pennsylvania before, but we've never been to Gettysburg. We've been to a whole lot of places in Pennsylvania. And especially our host and hostess, Jack and his dear wife, Claire. They took very good care of us since we arrived yesterday. We pulled in the street here, and Claire and Debbie were running down the street after us, shaking, waving. Yeah. It was really nice. And you gals and guys did a great job. I'd like to thank all of you. I'm extremely grateful. Every day of my life now, I have what I call a gratitude attack. As soon as I open my eyes, I have a gratitude attack. I'm grateful, number one, that I'm alive and breathing. Number two, that I'm sober. I have my bride. I have my kids. I have my grandchildren. I have a job. And I keep that gratitude list right up front so I can look at it any time of the day and night in case I start to feel sorry for poor little Joe and I want to sit on a pity pot and cry the blues. Instead of crying the blues, I pull myself up by the bootstraps today, and I look at that gratitude list and I say, hey, Pally, you got an awful lot to be grateful for. Talking for myself, my story is a little bit extraordinary. I came from an Irish, Italian, Roman Catholic background, and there was nobody practicing none of that in my house, though. My mother was Irish, and she was a drunk. And my father was Italian, born on the other side. And he had a couple of other problems going for him. He was a gambler and a womanizer. And when I grew up, I developed all three problems. So you know what that left me. Sick, sad, and sorry. I can tell you, I had a lot of bad attitudes as a young fella, and I carried those attitudes with me every place I went. I would rather fight than eat as a young fella. And I remember one time going to the store for my mother. They had the local butcher, baker, grocer. I was born and raised in downtown New York in a place called Little Italy. And as I was going to the store, I was window shopping, walking along, and there were two guys my age walking towards me. And when we crossed, we bumped. And that's all I would need. And when we bumped, I turned around and I dumped the first guy. And he went down. And the second guy came to help him. And I dumped him too. And when he went down, the second guy, he hit the ground and he fell down backwards. And his legs went up in the air like this. And his pants leg slid up. And this kid had two braces on his legs. And I felt like a real dirtbag. I felt like a real creep. I had no qualms about hurting the other guy, but I felt very bad about hurting this guy. And when I got in the street fight, once you went down, you didn't get up because I would become Fred Astaire and I would start tap dancing all over your head. And I did something I never did in a fight before or since. I bent over to help this guy up. And I guess the guy thought I was going to hit him again, and he started screaming, "Don't touch me, don't touch me." And I turned and walked away, and I felt like a real creep. And I want you to know that I carried guilt and remorse for that for many, many years. And I never ever mentioned that to another human being in my entire life until I did my 5th step in this program with my sponsor. I have a lot of bad situations in my background that I got into after I started drinking. You know, when I started drinking, it was a fun thing. Excuse me. I went to a neighborhood dance, and all of the guys were lined up on this wall, and all of the gals were lined up on that wall. And I certainly didn't want to be on this wall, and somebody brought in a few drinks or something, and I was over on that wall in no time at all. And that's how it began. It began as a lot of fun. It gave me a little bit of courage, I guess you might say, that beer muscles or whatever. And that's how it began. That's not how it ended, though. I could tell you that I went to sea as a young fella. I was a merchant seaman, and I did it to get away from New York. I almost killed my older brother in a fight, and I just wanted to get away from New York. New York was my problem. And I went to sea. I traveled all over the world, and I did the same thing every place I went. Every place I went, I got drunk. And after going through the merchant marine, I got in a fight one time in a waterfront in a foreign country, and there were 5 of us. Being the smallest guy, I walked in and took a stool from the bar and sat on the outside of the booth. We were sitting there drinking, having a nice time, and big Danish longshoreman walked in off the waterfront. And as he walked by, he purposely kicked the stool out from underneath me. And I found myself sitting on the floor looking up at a giant of a man. To me, everybody's big because I'm a small guy, but this guy happened to be a big guy. And I assumed if I got off the floor and started with him, that these 4 guys were going to help me. But I really didn't want that. And I very nonchalantly got up, brushed myself off, stood the stool back up, and sat down again like nothing happened. A number of hours later and a lot of drinks later, everybody forgot about that particular incident, except me. And I told these 4 fellas to start heading for the door. That stool that I was sitting on had a 4-inch oak seat on it like that. And I took that stool from behind my back and I cracked this guy in the back of the head with it, and I took off out the door. So I was not a nice guy. You see, I was the type of guy that if you fool with me, you will know that I was there, because if I don't do it now, I will be back. And that was my modus operandi for a long time. Well, after I got out of the merchant marine, I decided to go in the Navy. I did that. I could have made something out of myself. I chose to be a bum, and I just got drunk every place I went. During the last year in the Navy, I met a girl through a guy I was on the ship with. His wife and this girl were best friends, and it was a blind date, and I met this girl, and this girl is sitting up on the podium with me tonight. And I started to date her. She was a nice gal. I liked her. And her mother thought I was the best thing that ever came down the pike. Because I used to take this girl out to dinner and a movie, and I'd have her home by 10:30 and 11 o'clock at night. And that's when I went out and did my drinking. And her mom didn't know nothing about it. She thought I was the best. A year later, we got married. A year later, we had our first child, a little girl, Debbie, our oldest daughter. And by this time, I was driving a truck for a living. I was working in a wholesale meat house. And I was working with guys much older than myself. And it was around the clock drinking by this time. You know, I used to call up, I'd be late for supper. Then I'd call up, I ain't coming home. Then I'd come home 3 days later and wake her up at 4 o'clock in the morning and say, now I want you to make me dinner. You know, I was a nice little guy that way. And she was a dutiful wife. She did the best she could under the circumstances. She knew nothing about alcoholism. Neither did her mom. Her mom was a sweetheart to me. It got to the point where the disease caught up with me physically at a young age. I found myself on the floor in my second alcoholic convulsion at the age of 26. My best friend booze was killing me. It turned on me, and it was now killing me. That first few drinks I had at that neighborhood dance was no more fun, believe me. I came off that floor, the next day I was down the saloon, and I did something I never did before in my life. I nursed a drink. And I was sizing up myself. I got to look at that guy in the mirror, and I didn't like what I saw. I looked like a horror. I hadn't shaved in a month, hadn't taken a bath in a month, hadn't changed my work clothes all week. They were full of grease and blood. And for some strange reason, I had one half of the bar to myself that morning. And there were young people my own age coming in, have a few drinks, and they were going to go visit Aunt Tilly or Aunt Millie. It was New Year's, and I say to myself, I make 3 times the money that creep makes, and I never got a dime. Why? I got a young bride at home. I never take her no place no more. Why? I got 3 or 4 suits hanging up in the closet. I never got time to wear them no more. Why? I finally put my finger on why. Why? Was because I was drunk, I was going on a drunk, I was coming off a drunk, or I was anticipating a drunk. My whole life revolved around a bottle. And I went to the DTs at the bar. The bartender called the apartment. My bride showed up with my mother and her uncle. They dragged me and put me in a cab and took me to a city hospital in the South Bronx. I came into the program up in the Bronx, which is a borough of New York City. And this doctor was very kind, you see. They're dragging me in the door, ranting and raving out of my skull. They put me in a room with a cop, and I screamed and cursed at this guy. When I came out of it, I called him everything and anything I could think of. And the guy never said 2 words to me. While I was screaming at this guy, a nurse came running through the door with 3 needles in her hand. And she hit me in the arm with all 3 of them at once, and I thought she broke them off in my arm. And then all of a sudden, that guy I was screaming at wasn't such a bad guy. That stuff she hit me with was pretty potent stuff, I'll tell you. I know one of them was formaldehyde. You could smell that stuff 3 blocks away. The doctor, in the meantime, had taken my bride into another room. You see, my bride was 9 months pregnant with our second child at this time. And he gave her a suggestion, which I found out about a year later. The suggestion was this: young lady, as you can see, I really don't have much time to spend with you. I'm very busy tonight. But I would like to give you this suggestion. And the suggestion is this: if you have any money, or if you get a chance to get your hands on any money, get together all you can and invest it on life insurance on that bum in there. He's 26 years old. He's a chronic alcoholic. And if he keeps on drinking the way he's drinking, he'll be dead by the time he's 30, and you can live happily ever after as a rich widow. Well, I can tell you that had I heard that suggestion, I'm sure I would have had a difference of opinion with him. Believe me. I done something after that. I woke up the next morning and I was the color green, like that grass outside there, and I felt like that. And I couldn't stop shaking. I had St. Vitus dance. I knew if I took a few drinks that I would settle down. But I knew as soon as those few drinks wore off, I'd be right back again, and I didn't want it. And I had my bride call AA for me. And I hear her on the phone with somebody, and I hear her say, "No, it's not for me, it's for my husband." She says, "Here, he wants to talk to you." I get on the phone with this guy, and he's talking to me like he knows me for an awful long time. And he invites me down to the intergroup office, which was in New York City. And my bride had to shave me. She had to stand me up in the shower and wash me. And she had to dress me, because I was incapable of doing it myself. I was shaking so bad, if I went to shave, I would have cut my throat. I'm sure I would have made a lot of other people happy, but I wouldn't have been too happy. And she gave me 2 tokens to get on the subway to go down there with and come back with. And I got on the train, and every time that subway wheel screeched, I thought my head was going to jump off, but it didn't. And I got down to the intergroup office, which was on 39th Street in Lexington Avenue. Walked past the door 3 times before I got up enough moxie to walk in. Thought I walked into the wrong place, because when I walked in, it was a business office. There were people busy typing and answering telephones. You see, my impression of AA was from Skid Row in New York. I used to drive this meat truck to prisons, hospitals, institutions. And they had a place down on 3rd Street off 3rd Avenue, which is the Bowery. And it was a shelter run by the city for the guys down on Skid Row, where they could go in and get a meal and a flop for the night. And I used to sit in the truck and drink and laugh at these guys trying to unload this truck. I could have been in and out of there in 5 minutes. But I used to sit there and laugh at these guys and point my finger. I said, if I ever got that bad, I'd quit. But when I went to get the receipt signed, there was a sign the size of that wall back there. AA meetings every Thursday night, 8:30 p.m., all welcome. The letters on that sign were this high. They're almost as high as I am. So I couldn't miss that sign. And that sign stuck in my mind. So my impression of AA was from Skid Row. You see, when I walked in that door, I expected to see a bunch of winos bouncing off the walls, maybe a Salvation Army band in the back playing music, and everybody jumping up and down shouting hallelujah. And I turned to walk back out the door, and this guy stuck his head up from the desk, and he said, hiya, Joe, come on in. And I'm standing there like this saying, how does this guy know who I am? That was the guy I'd been talking to on the telephone. And I talked with this guy for an hour. He sent somebody out for a container of coffee. And he said, oh yeah, get an extra container. And he gave me the full treatment. You know, he took the full container and he poured half of it into the empty container and handed it to me. I was shaking so bad I would have spilled it all over everybody. He made me inquisitive enough to want to go to my first meeting. While I was sitting there talking with this guy, he's reading my mail, you know. He's saying to me, what are you thinking about, Joe? And I told him, I was honest with the guy. I said, you know, Pally, you're making a nice buck for sitting here listening to my troubles. I wouldn't mind a little piece of this action myself. And the guy starts laughing. He's laughing hysterically. I says, what's the joke, Pally? He says, I don't get paid for this. Then I almost fell off the chair laughing. I said, look, brother, there's nothing for nothing in this world. What does it cost to join your club? He said, it costs you an hour's time at a meeting every night. He said, oh, yeah. He said, they pass the basket at a meeting. He said, if you got a dime, you could throw it in. If you got nothing, you're still welcome at the meeting. He said, go home, somebody will contact you. And later on in the afternoon, some guy called. He said, oh, my name's Gene. I'm from AA. You still want to go to a meeting tonight? I said, yeah. He said, all right, you meet me on the corner of Fordham Road and Marion Avenue at 7 o'clock. I'll be wearing this kind of hat and this kind of jacket. I said, okay. And I get off the phone with this guy and I start thinking about that. What do you mean I'll be wearing this kind of hat and this kind of jacket? What is this, some kind of secret communist organization? I don't know. What am I getting into here? Well, I borrowed a deuce off my bride to go up to this meeting, and I walked up from the South Bronx to the North Bronx where this meeting was to try and walk off the shakes. I got there early, and I'm pacing up and down in this corner looking for this clown with this kind of hat and this kind of jacket, and this bum don't show up. Unbeknown to me, I was pacing up and down right in front of the meeting hall. I didn't even know it. The guy was inside making the coffee. And I seen a young couple get out of a car and go inside. And about 5 minutes later, the girl came back out. She said, excuse me, are you Joe? You waiting for a fellow named Gene? I said, yeah. She said, he's inside making the coffee. Why don't you come on in? And again, they gave me the full treatment. You know, they poured me a half a cup of coffee. Do you take sugar? Do you take cream? Yeah, yeah. And again, I'm standing there like this. I can't hold it still. This guy, Gene, became my sponsor. And I'll be forever grateful to the guy. The guy saved my life. I didn't particularly like him when I first met him, because he asked me a lot of corny questions, you know, like, which drink is it that gets you drunk, kid? I looked at him. I said, is this guy talking to me? Yeah, he was talking to me, all right. to move everybody from the kitchen into the meeting, to have a big cowbell that they clong along. They had to peel me off the ceiling with that one. And they marched me into a room that's the size of this room here, you see. And it's just like this room. There's 3 aisles, one down the center and one on each side of the room, and nothing but chairs in between and people sitting in them. There were 250 people sitting in that room. And we get to the back of the center aisle, and Gene says, "I like to sit up front so I can hear." I said, "I got no problem with that." We're walking down the aisle, and about halfway down the aisle, he stops. He turns and he shouts out loud, "You're in rough shape, kid. Do you want a shot?" Everybody in his room zeroed in on me. And I said to myself, look at his bum. He's testing me. And I told him in a couple of quote-unquote words that if I wanted a shot, I wouldn't be here now. Only those weren't the exact words. And he marched me up to the first seat in the first row, and I sat on my hands, and I heard 3 speakers that night. And one of them was that girl that came outside to get me. She was 3 years sober, and I was sitting there falling apart at the seams, feeling sorry for her. That might sound crazy, but this girl used to drink in some of the same joints that I used to live in, and I'm saying to myself, my God, it's a miracle this girl is alive, never mind sober. Then this little Jewish guy got up. He was about my height and about 1/10 of my weight. He was this big. And his name was Jaime Rosenthal O'Shea. Jaime belonged to the South Bronx group of AA, and it was all Irishmen. So they made Jaime an honorary Irishman. But Jaime got up there and told my story. And where I had stopped and come to my first meeting, Jaime continued talking for another 20 minutes worth about all the good stuff that was out there waiting for me. You know, the flight decks and the lockups and all of that good stuff. And I could read the handwriting on the wall before I left that night. And after the meeting, this guy, Gene, introduced me to a bunch of guys. And one of them I knew, because I used to drink in his saloon. He was in the program 2 years before I got here. And he was very happy to see me. So, oh, brother, it's about time, you know. And I remember this one guy saying to me, try the program for 90 days sober, kid. And I stopped shaking, and I looked this guy right in the eye. I said, 90 days? I said, hey, Pally, that's 3 months. If I could stay sober for 3 days, it would be a miracle. And guess who was standing right behind me when I said that? Gene. And he said, try staying sober for the rest of tonight, stupid. I said, one day I'm going to pay this guy back. I'm going to rip his face off. I'm going to beat him with it. Something happened to me when I walked through the doors that night to my very first meeting that had never happened to me before in my entire life. For the very first time in my life, I became teachable. Prior to that night, you could not tell me, Jack, nothing, because I would tune you out, turn you off, and been gone. But for some strange reason, the grace of God entered my life when I walked through them doors. And I took the cotton out of my ears, I shoved it in my filthy mouth, and I shut the hell up for the first time in my life, and I sat down and listened to somebody who knew much better than I did. And it pays off in great big dividends. There's an art to listening. We learn to listen, and we listen to learn. And that's all part of growing up in this program. You know, I could tell you that I stayed dry in these rooms for about 3 years. But I could tell you about my first 3 months in AA. That's better yet, because my bride was home with a new baby. You know, when she had our first son, Joseph, when she woke from having his baby, I was standing on one side of the bed sober, and my sponsor, Gene, was standing on the other side of the bed, so she knew I was in good hands. Now, you know, when I'm going out to meetings at night, now I'm shaving and I'm showering and I'm putting on clean clothes, and she's sitting home with a new baby. And about 3 months into the program, I'm getting all dolled up this night to go out to the meeting, and my bride looks over at me, and she said to me, "Where the hell are you going?" And I looked at her. I said, "I'm going out to my meeting." She said, "That's wonderful. You're telling me you're going to these meetings. I really don't know where you're going, who you're going with, or what you're doing." I did what my sponsor told me to do when I got angry. I stopped to think, and you could see the smoke coming out of my ears. I'm saying to myself, look at this. I'm sober a whole 3 months. Now, you got to understand, 3 months to me, being sober, was like being sober for a lifetime. I'm sober a whole 3 months, and this nice little lady still doesn't trust me. I said to her, "Tonight is the open meeting. Anyone is welcome to come to the open meeting. They don't even have to have a problem with booze. So if you'd like to come with me, you're welcome to come. But whether you come with me or you don't come with me, I'm going to the meeting." Being I invited her took me off the hook. She decided to stay home. I trot up to the meeting. I'm looking to dump this in Gene's lap. Gene's working late. He doesn't get to the meeting till after it starts. Okay? Speaker gets up there and he starts talking about his drunk-a-log. I'm listening to him with one ear, and on the other side of my head I'm turning this around, you see. "Where the hell are you going, stupid?" And he started talking about when he got into the program and what happened to him. And he said, "I was sober about 3 months, and I was getting all dolled up this night to go out to the meeting. And my bride said to me, 'Where the hell are you going?' And I said, 'Wow!'" After the meeting, I ran up to this guy. He was then sober 5 years, Hank. And I told Hank what happened, and he laughed. And he said, "Joe, when you go home tonight," he said, "you invite your bride out to dinner tomorrow night." He said, "and when she gets off the floor, you take her out to dinner tomorrow night, and you bring her over to the group that I belong to." She was willing to come, and we did this. We had dinner, and Hank was patiently waiting outside the door, pacing up and down, waiting for us. I introduced my bride to Hank, and he opened the door to this drill hall. It was a whole city block long, and his wife Mary was down the other end of that room. And he yelled for her, "Hey, Mary!" This little Irish lady was this big, and she had a mouth on her like a subway tunnel. You could hear her 3 blocks away. She answered him like she was standing right next to us. She came over, he introduced my bride to his bride, and she grabbed my bride by the hand, and she said, "Come on, dearie, come on." And he grabbed me by the arm, and he said, "Let's go." I said, "Where are we going?" He said, "We're going downstairs to an AA meeting. Your bride is attending her first Al-Anon meeting." That dear little lady became her sponsor, and we started to grow together in these rooms. And there was no more question of where I'm going, who I'm going with, or what I'm doing. And I'm very grateful to you people in Al-Anon. We started to grow together. But what happened to me is I started to do this on the fellowship part of the program. I was running out to meetings every night. I was helping other drunks, midnight runs to here and there to help guys get themselves sobered up. But I never went past step number 1, and that's where I sold myself short. I was 2-stepping it. That's what they used to call it in those days. I was staying sober on the first step and trying to carry the message in 1/3 of the 12th step. I didn't want to be bothered with the other steps in between. And I owed out a lot of money when I came into these rooms. And I didn't owe it to a bank, and I didn't owe it to a loan company. I owed it to the biggest godfather in New York. My father worked for him for 30 years. And I had to make the debt good. I worked 3 jobs my first 6 years of sobriety, and I don't recommend this to anybody. I slept 3 hours a day for 6 years just to pay off what I owed. I owed out $68,000 when I walked into my first meeting, and I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. But I remember about 3 years into the program of staying dry, I came home after a 22-hour day, and I walked up 5 flights of stairs to our little walk-up in the Bronx. And when I came through the door, it was, "Hail the conquering hero is home," And instead of my bride looking to give me a kiss, she was looking to give me a kick in the rump because she had a tough day with our kids. And I felt myself going into a rage. Can anybody identify with a rage? And I know what I'm capable of doing in a rage. And I turned to walk back out the door. And as I reached for the doorknob, there was a broom standing right next to it, and it had a handle on it like that. And instead of going out that door, I picked up the broom, and I whacked her right across the chest with it and broke it. And it was at that point that I knew I was not sober in AA, that I was just dry. I said, "What the hell are you doing, stupid? When you were drinking, there was an excuse for this kind of behavior. What excuse have you got now?" And I came up with a big zero. I said, "Why don't you do the world a favor? Why don't you walk up another flight of stairs and take a dive? Because you're on the 5th floor. Maybe you're not an alcoholic. Maybe you're just crazy." And again, the grace of God steps into my life. Tonight is the meeting night. I'll go down to the meeting, and if I want to do it, I'll do it later. I walk out the door, I get down the meeting, there's a priest who belongs to our group. Father J. Joseph Ryan, he was a Jesuit priest. He was a teacher. He was a psychologist. He taught psychology at Fordham University, which was only a block away from our home group. And he was also an alcoholic, sober the same amount of time as I was in these rooms. And prior to that night, when I'd walk into the room, he'd look at me and he always gave me the same greeting. "Hiya, Jojo, how are you?" And he always wore the collar. And I didn't want no part of no collars. And it's to say, "Fine, Father, how are you?" And I was gone. I walked in the door that night. He was standing right inside the door with a cup of coffee in his hand. Gave me the same greeting. "Hiya, Jojo, how are you?" I looked at him and I said, "You really want to know?" He said, "Yeah." I told him what just happened. He put the coffee down. Let's go. We left and we went over to Fordham and we sat down in one of the conference rooms and we started talking. And he laid out this program to me from soup to nuts. He showed me where I missed the boat, that I never went past step number 1, and that I have to put a power greater than myself into my life if I ever expect to stay sober in these rooms. I hear a lot of people in the room say, "Oh, there's no must in AA. I don't have to do nothing." You're absolutely right. If you don't want to stay sober, you don't have to do a damn thing. But if you want to stay sober, there's a lot of musts. A lot of musts. I must get involved in these steps, and I must move forward. I have to change the bum that brought me through those doors. Because if I don't, that same bum is going to take me back out them doors. So I got busy with Father Joe, and I started going to big book study meetings, and I started to go to step meetings like a kid going to school with a pad, a pen, and a book. And on the first step I had something to say, and after that I had nothing to say for the next 11 weeks. And I did a lot of writing. And after the meetings I used to go over these with Father Joe, and that's how I got the answers on how to put these steps into my life on a daily basis. And learned how to grow up and become a man that I always wanted to be and always thought I was. It's not an easy task, but anybody can do it, and all you need is just that little bit of willingness. That's all. And if you have that little bit of willingness, and you have a trust in another human being that you can talk to and confide in and use as a sponsor, then you're going to go all the way, right to the top. I was about 6 months sober in AA when I met one of the co-founders, Bill Wilson. I had been the coffee maker in our group, and 6 months later another new bird walked into the group, so they fired me and hired him, but they gave me a promotion. They made me the literature chairman. Do you know what the literature chairman's job is? They give you an order form all filled out with what they want for books and literature, with a money order made out to general service for the exact amount. And you go down to an office building in New York, they make up a package, you bring it back to the group, put the group stamp on each piece, and display it. That's the literature chairman's job. I go down to this office building, it's got a directory the size of that wall, and I'm looking at this directory saying, does it go under general service? Does it go under Intergroup? Does it go under Alcoholics Anonymous? I must have been standing there looking confused. From behind me, I hear some guy say, excuse me, are you looking for the General Service Office? I said, yeah. Big, tall, gray-haired guy. He said, I'm going up there. Come on, I'll show you where it is. We get in the elevator, go upstairs. Everybody busy in this office working. We walk in the door. Everybody stops working. Good morning, Bill. Hello, Bill. Hi, Bill. And I'm saying to myself, Bill, who the hell is Bill? Then it dawns on me that this guy is Bill Wilson. And I says, hey, are you Bill Wilson? He said, yeah. I said, hey, my name's Joe. I got to know Bill pretty good. We got to become pretty good friends. And I'm very grateful that I got to know Bill, one of the co-founders. I would like to have known Dr. Bob, but that was before my time. He was gone to the big meeting upstairs. And I stayed good friends with Bill. And Bill gave me something, because he took me into his office in that General Service office, and we sat there for about an hour talking. And he gave me a little card. Because I asked Bill a question, and the question I asked Bill was, Bill, what's in it for me in the long run in this program? Bill took out this little card and handed it to me. And on this little card are the 12 promises of AA. And for that, I'll be forever grateful, because now I know why I stayed busy in AA all of these years. I got very active in prison work, even in the beginning. You know, I was co-chairman of Rikers Island Prison for 10 years. I had a meeting in Nassau County Prison for 10 years. I've been active. I've been in most of the prisons in New York State. And I was co-chairman with a little Scotchman in Rikers Island. And this guy had a great sense of humor. He was a tough little Scotchman, an older man than myself. He was about 15 years sober, and I was just coming around. And Jimmy Rodney was his name. God loved that little guy. He wanted to get me to smile in the worst way, and I just couldn't crack a smile. He used to call me Cement Face. Are you afraid to crack a smile for fear your face will fall off? And he used to rub me. He knew I was half Irish and half Italian, and he used to love to needle me. Going over, we used to have to take a ferry ride to get to Rikers Island. Going over on the ferry one night, he says to me, you know, Joe, he says, I think Christopher Columbus was an alcoholic. And I looked at him, I said, Jimmy, what in the hell would Christopher Columbus have to do with being... Before you get in your high horse, hear me out, okay? He says, when he wanted to go on this trip, he went to a woman and borrowed the money, didn't he? I said, yeah. He said when he left Spain to go to the New World, he didn't know where he was going. And when he got to the New World, he didn't know where he was. And when he got back to Spain from the New World, he didn't know where he'd been. He says, that's typical alcoholic confusion. I want to tell you, I rolled off of the seat. And I started laughing. I had a belly laugh like I hadn't had in years. That little Scotchman got me to crack that smile. He got me to get that belly laugh off. And I'll tell you, it felt damn good. Because it had been a long, long time since I laughed. You know, we have a son. That son that was born 3 weeks after I came into the rooms of AA, who developed the same disease I have. We have 7 children, fellas. The program works. Joseph was the second born. He grew up and developed the same disease I have. And he ran us a merry road for a while until we had to sit down and we had to show him some tough love. And the tough love that we had to show him was, We're no longer going to enable you. You want to do what you want to do, you go right ahead. But you're not going to do it here. Your history. You no longer live here. Get out and don't come back. Sounds cold, sounds cruel. But I want to tell you, when we put him out that door, as we were putting him out that door, I looked up. And I said to the boss upstairs, he's all yours, Polly, because there's nothing more I can do for this young man. I have been the power of example for him, and that's all I can do. He chooses to go his own way. I cannot change that. I cannot stop him. But I cannot enable him anymore. He's all yours. Do with him what you have to do. And I had to step back and let the boss take over. You know, it's nice when you turn things over, but 5 minutes later, you're pulling it back again because you're doing it your way, and you really don't want to let go. But we turned him loose and we let him go. And the boss upstairs did what he had to do. He had to live in the streets for 3 years. He had to have convulsions in telephone booths. He had to do a lot of things to reach his bottom. And thank God he reached his bottom and he didn't die. There was a good chance he could have. But he got sober too in these rooms. He knew where the help was. And after he got sober in a rehab for the second time, he had no place to go. I would not allow him back home. He went to Graymore up in Garrison, New York to live for a while. He called a good friend of mine in the rooms. That fellow that was in the rooms 2 years before me, a fellow named Mickey Diamond. And Mickey was as tough as nails. And Mickey called me in the middle of the night. He said, Joe, I just got a call from your son. I think he's ready. Give him another shot. I said, you got it, Mick. When my son came home, he called and I told him, you can come home. And you're welcome to stay here as long as you like. As long as you don't pick up. If you pick up, you've taken yourself back outside that door again. And we didn't make it comfortable for him for the first couple of months. He slept on the couch. We wouldn't even give him his own room back. So you talk about tough love? You people you have it in you, the same as my wife and I have it in us. You can show them tough love if they're giving you a tough time. Do not be afraid. Turn them over to the boss upstairs, but then leave them in his hands. And step back. Don't take it back. Let it go. And the boss will do whatever he has to do. This young fella was an iron worker in the city, dancing on steel 80 and 90 stories up in the air. That's where he did all of his drinking and drugging. He's a powerhouse. He bench presses 500 pounds. This guy picks it up like it's nothing. And this is the guy I had to put out the door with a bat in my hand. But he had enough respect that he wouldn't pick up his hands to his father. That same guy that I thought was brain dead graduated 2 weeks ago from college. He gave up that work, went to college, and graduated 2 weeks ago. He did a 4-year course in 3 years, and he's now an RN. And he's sober 5 years now in AA. And we're very, very grateful for that. You talk about miracles? Everybody in this room is a miracle. That's why we're all here. This is God's answer to all of the prayers said over many, many years by many, many wives and husbands, mothers, fathers, whatever, for the alcoholics in their life when there was no program. He gave us these programs. This is God's gift to the alcoholics and their family. You have a very precious gift. Don't take it lightly. You have the gift of walking into a situation that's nothing but utter chaos. and sitting down and talking to someone and making sense to them where they will get up off their rump, and instead of feeling sorry for poor little me, they'll start to come around to the meetings and they'll start to do the right things for themselves. I've seen it. I've done it. Walk into an apartment. There's His Majesty the baby sitting at the kitchen table. He's pounding the table and he's shouting orders to everybody. The bride looks like a good meal at killer. And all the kids already scattered. They're hiding under the beds. But then make sense to this guy. Your first reaction is, I'd like to grab him by the neck and just lift him up and shake him just a little bit, just to get his attention. And my sponsor, Gene, keeps telling me, it don't work that way. And I say, okay, then I do it the way you tell me. And he taught me. You sit and you talk with this guy. And I've seen the guy get up from the kitchen table, pour his bottle down the sink, come around to the meetings, and a month later the bride comes along to the meeting with him on a Saturday night. And instead of that old rag of a coat she's been wearing for the last 5 years, she's got a winter coat on. It looks like it's going to keep her warm. The following Saturday night, the 3 or 4 little kids come into the meeting. Then they're all cleaned up. They got beautiful clean clothes on. Their shoes are shined. They got little rosy cheeks. Count your blessings. You have that gift. That power that's in these rooms is nowhere else. That was brought home to me by a little priest up in the Bronx many years ago. He was the Monsignor. We had the meeting in his school hall. He was not an alcoholic. They invited the Monsignor down to say a few words at the opening. And this little Barry Fitzgerald type of priest got up there and he welcomed everybody. He said, it's so nice to see all of you fellas sober and you're doing the right things and you're going to work and you're bringing money home to the wife and the kids are doing good in school. And he said, you people have a power in this room that I wish I had upstairs in my church. And that was a profound statement, but a true statement. A true statement. So you have a power. And if each and every one of you that are sitting here tonight leaves here with something more than you came with, then it was worth you being here. And if you leave here and come back next year, and if each one of you brought back one other person, they'd have to build a bigger college. You know, they told me that Mamie and Dwight used to come to this college quite regularly. Geez, that's awful nice. But I got news for you. Mamie and Dwight were never treated as royally as my bride and I've been treated since we got here. It's unbelievable. I'm forever grateful to you people. And I'm very grateful that you invited us here to speak. You know, about 8 years ago, I was leading a series of step meetings in the group that I belong to in Long Island. And during the course of one of the step meetings, I mentioned that incident about the young fellow with the braces on his legs. And after the meeting, this guy begs me and he says, hey, Joe, you got a minute? I want to speak to you in the kitchen. I said, no problem, brother. What's on your mind? He said, you mentioned something before about 2 young fellas going to the store. You got in a fight and this kid had braces. I said, yeah. He said, where did you live at the time? I told him. He said to me, you know, God forgave you for that. I said, hey, Pally, I'm well aware of that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. But I want you to know something else. He said, I forgive you too. And he pulled up his pants legs. It was the same guy. I went stark raving nuts in the kitchen. I grabbed this guy in a bear hug, lifted him off the ground, and started running around with him in my arms in the kitchen, crying like a baby. And he's yelling, put me down, put me down. I want to tell you, when I came home that night, and I came through the door, my bride is the so-called normal one. She looked at me and she said, what the hell is wrong with you? I said, if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. She said, why don't you try me? And I told her what happened. And she looked over at me. She said, wow, that's heavy. I said, yeah, tell me about it. The boss upstairs, you know, when I made out my list in the 8th step, I made 4 lists. I made the now list, the people I'm going to make amends to now. I made the laters, the ones I'm going to make amends to later. I made the maybes, maybe I'll make amends to these. And then I had the nevers. I'm never going to see these guys, so I'll never make amends to them. And this guy was on the top of the list. So the boss upstairs got a great sense of humor, let me tell you. Gong. Time's up. I'm going to close with a little story. This guy walks into a saloon. Says to the bartender, give me 2 balls and 2 beers. The bartender gives it to him. He looks at this jerk. He said, why did this dummy just order a double? Night after night, the guy's doing the same thing. Give me 2 shots and 2 beers. The bartender gets talking with him when I say, hey, Joe, why don't you just order a double instead of ordering 2 shots and 2? He said, I couldn't do that. He said, why not? It's because I have a friend of mine in San Francisco, and every night we have a drink to one another at the same time. Bartender goes along with the program. Night after night, the same routine. One night he comes in, he says to the bartender, give me 1 ball and 1 beer. Bartender gives him the ball and the beer. Guy dumps it. Boom, boom. He says to him, what happened? Your friend in San Francisco is sick? Did he die? He said, no, that was for my friend in San Francisco. I joined AA. The message behind that is, if you're coming in here, come in with both feet. The water's fine. It's not going to hurt you here. For those of you who came in tonight seeking sobriety or recovery, God grant that you find it. And for those of you who came here tonight to maintain your sobriety or your recovery, God grant that you keep it. It's the most precious gift you will ever receive. Thanks for listening.